Hey, Chicago Fire fans. It is Nick here at the Feed the Fire podcast, and we are talking to you about the latest Chicago Fire match, the result against the Columbus Crew at home here in Chicago. And then in the second half, we're going to take a little look back at what's going on around the league this season. We'll go over the current standings, a few surprises, in my opinion, good and bad, because we're at about the halfway point here now, 17 games or so into the season, and it's time to kind of get a bigger picture of where the Fire stand and where the rest of this league is. But we know that it's not going to be a fun conversation because of the Fire's 2-1 heartbreaking loss to the Columbus Crew. And I'd say heartbreaking, but I'm going to take that back because Fire fans, our hearts are already been broken time and time again. I don't know what's left of any of these pieces for the Fire to break, but they do keep finding ways to break our hearts. And as I have titled this episode, they keep finding new ways to lose. Before we dive into our analysis and review, I want to remind everyone that Feed the Fire is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water, and you will hear from our featured guest, John Donovan, later on in the show in our Skira halftime segment. But now let's start as we typically do here with the starting lineup, right? Let's start at the beginning, a very good place to start for all you musical aficionados out there. Spencer Ritchie gets the start in goal. Klopas decides to go with a 3 in the back, with Pineda in the center, Chihos and Suke out wide. And at least this is what MLSsoccer.com is showing us here on the match review page. 4 midfielders, Gaston Jimenez, Federico Navarro, your defensive midfielders playing centrally, and Miguel Navarro and Maran Haile Selassie playing on the wings. So this is, again, very interesting because, as has been pointed out on this show and in numerous Chicago Fire social media accounts, fan accounts, of course, not officially on the team, because then someone would have to actually be paying attention in this organization to point out the fact that 3 in the back, I don't think the Fire have ever won a game 3 in the back, and they may have never even drawn a game 3 in the back. That I would have to verify, but I'm fairly certain that they've never won starting 3 in the back. And then at the very least going a 3-4-2-1 with Shaqiri and Gutierrez as your attacking mids and then Kai Kamara as your lone striker up top. Now, first, we've talked about the 3 in the back thing. Secondly, this is not the 3 in the back that you want. You don't want Suke staying back and playing as a right center back. He's supposed to be getting up the field playing in crosses. He's supposed to be the one who's had some excellent link-up play with Maran Haile Selassie, and then you work Shaqiri into that, and you can get some crosses into your target strikers. Putting him in the back line there completely limits your offense. Klopas, I guess, was gambling on Miguel Navarro and Maran Haile Selassie getting up the pitch. And early on in the game, it kind of worked. Selassie was getting into dangerous areas. He was taking on defenders one-on-one, and the Chicago Fire had the bulk, if not all, of the opportunities to score a goal in the first half. Columbus really didn't generate much. Possession was a little back and forth, especially if you look at the splits on the statistics page. But Selassie was getting forward, and we know Navarro is a threat to get forward. And actually, looking ahead to the goal he assisted, it was his run down the wing with the assist, right? That he found the space, he played the ball right where it was supposed to be to a non-rushing Shaqiri who finds the back of the net. So, Selassie, Navarro as your wingers, but not as much in a defensive role. You see Klopas is trying to be more attack-minded, and he actually gets Shaqiri and Gutierrez on the pitch together, but they could just never really find that rhythm. Gutierrez was almost playing as, dare I say, an inverted winger. Like, he was making more off-the-ball runs, it seemed, than he was trying to get on the ball and progress the play and link up with Shaqiri and the wingers and the strikers. So, again, the Chicago Fire, over the last season plus, since signing Xherdan Shaqiri and identifying Brian Gutierrez as their upcoming star, have yet to find a formation that works for them. And you know what? There may not be a formation that works for them, and then you can point the finger up at the front office for having a homegrown to walk into that position, and then also having the most expensive player in the league in that same spot. Not good roster building. Meanwhile, we're still missing a striker. Personally, I think Koutsias can be the guy if he is played as a striker. And let's look at the lineup at the end of the game. The substitutions did not change the formation at all. So I guess if it ain't broke, don't fix it from Frank Lopez's perspective. And they had generated some opportunities early on for him to think that this was going to stick. But here are the substitutions. You have Suke coming out for Jonathan Dean. He's more of a defensive presence, but he also can push forward than I think. He's more of a defensive presence than I think Suke should be. You got Jairo Torres and Fabian Herbers coming in for Gaston Jimenez and Maran Haile Selassie. And Torres, I like when he gets the ball, he looks forward and then drives forward. But he was not able to do too much in this game. Fabian Herbers, I have never been really sold on him. I've been wanting to like him. I hear he's a great guy, great personality, inside and outside of the locker room. And, you know, I almost said competent. He's a decent enough MLS player, but I think a lot of the Fire fans are done with Fabian Herbers. And if the Chicago Fire are ever going to be a team that wants to make a run in the playoffs, Fabian Herbers is not going to be a starter or an option off the bench. He's going to be back end. He's going to be rotation guy. Like, his level of talent is that of a trophy winning team, right? He cannot be a focal point in this Fire team if the Fire team ever expect to win trophies. And again, he's always due for a terrible tackle and a bad yellow card, and here it is once again. The other substitutions that really kind of shocked me, Koutsias coming in for Gutierrez. Now, that doesn't shock me because Guti was looking tired. And, you know, you're going to hit a wall as a 19-year-old playing as many minutes as he's had this season, more so than ever in his life. But they kept him centrally. He was not that lone striker up top, or a dual striker with Shabilko. We know that's how Shabilko likes to play. And honestly, when Shaqiri scored that goal, Shabilko was making his run towards the near post and was running into defenders. Like, watch his runs. He's not finding space. So I question the lineup. I question the substitutions. And when they occurred, that's just as bad as the subs themselves. Shabilko comes in for Kamara and Koutsias comes in for Gutierrez in the 63rd minute. Again, the Fire are down a goal at this point. They need something, and you bring in Shabilko and Koutsias. Honestly, I would have liked to see anyone else but Shabilko come in and just leave Koutsias as the striker up front. But if you're going to bring him in, you got to change the formation, and they did not. Then you saw Torres and Dean come in the 78th and Herbers come in the 80th. I mean, Jimenez had been walking since that first goal. You want to go back and watch that goal that Cucho scores. Jimenez does not track back at all. He just gives the token little like puff of the arms to make it look like you're jogging, but no, does not put in any defensive effort on that play. And you even hear the broadcasters, as terrible as they are, as terrible as this broadcast team was, they actually do point out the fact when this goal is scored, nobody steps. Jimenez doesn't step back. Navarro doesn't step forward. And in fact, he steps in the way and the shot deflects off of him, Federico Navarro, that is, to the opposite side of Spencer Ritchie, who had no chance on that one. God, I feel terrible for Chicago Fire goalkeepers this season because their defense hangs them out to dry repeatedly. All right. Now, let's talk about these goals, right? You had Cucho in the 59th. We just talked about that one a little bit. Shaqiri, we also, in the 88th, gets the tie. You would think that would be a momentum shift, right? But nope, it's Columbus maintaining the possession, and then a Fabian Herbers turnover, Zelarayan with arguably the goal of the year so far, maybe one of the best in his career, that is full of amazing goals. Herbers gets his pass back deflected right to Zelarayan, who doesn't even take a touch. He is in his own half of the field, right in the middle of the field, maybe 2 or 3 yards from the center spot, the kickoff spot, and just lets fly. And there's nothing but Spencer Ritchie can do except flap his arms at it. And he does flap his arms at it, and it's kind of funny. You should go back and watch that. And if there's any tech-savvy people out there, you should make that a GIF of Spencer Ritchie just flailing at a ball that's 10 feet over his head and already in the back of and then in the back of the net. Now, lots of things go wrong on that play. Defense is out of position. Bad ball from Herbers. Richie's not paying attention. Can't get back in time. Like there's a lot of things that went wrong there, leading to that goal. And as we've seen with the Chicago Fire, just finding ways to lose late. And in this case, finding a new way to lose with such an incredible goal from Zelarayan, who was, by the way, he was due for one the way he'd been playing in this match. Now let's take a look at some of the other statistics and see if it kind of matches up with your eye test and what you think occurred in this game. Chicago ended up with 43% possession. Sounds about right. Most of that possession coming in spurts in the first half and then at the end of the game when they were pushing for the equalizer. Only 7 shots, though, only 2 shots on goal. So, again, the Chicago Fire are not doing anything offensively. Like, they are barely creating any opportunities. Their expected goal tonight was 0.6. 0.6 XG. Shaqiri's goal was actually their best percentage-wise chance of the night at 15%. That was it. It's incredible to think that the Chicago Fire can create so poor opportunities, if any at all. Continuing down with our statistics review here. They only had 435 passes, completing 81%. And with the Fire, as with a lot of other teams, anything over 80% passing completion suggests that they're playing mostly in their own half, their own defensive third. And that's exactly it. Because if you look at the rest of the numbers, the final third passing was 60%. The attacking half was 71%. So you know that the Chicago Fire's bulk of their passing was in their own defensive third, their own half. And if you really want interesting passing breakdown, we talked about in the last episode how Columbus is one of, if not the best offensive teams in MLS right now. They lead the league in goals scored coming into this weekend. They led the league in assists, I believe, or were second in assists. They're top 5 in like every passing category. Go to MLSsoccer.com, pull up the Chicago Columbus recap, look at the passing breakdown. If you look at Columbus, the way they work this is every time there's a pass, it makes the line a little bit thicker between the two players on the position, right? Columbus, it looks like the most beautifully strong spider web here. There's a beautiful little star right in the middle. You have their center back and their right and left center backs just all passing beautifully into the midfielders and then working some up on the wing with Yaya Boa, who again, one of the top assist guys in the league right now, and the Chicago, and he just, is linking up constantly with his teammates in this game. The Fire really didn't have much to do with him. You look at that passing network, it is tight, and there's lots of passes. There's guys passing all around. You look at the Chicago Fire passing network, the only really strong connection you see here is Rafa Chihos to Mauricio Pineda. And then you see a little bit of Gutierrez or Shaqiri and Miguel Navarro, which is a nice little thing to watch, especially remembering Miguel Navarro is only 22 years old. He's actually maybe building a connection with Shaqiri. It's just too bad that the formation isn't working when you start 3 in the back like that. Then the other kind of passing you see is a little bit of Shaqiri and Suke, a little bit of Shaqiri and Navarro. It's not a good network because especially when you're looking at Gutierrez, who's supposed to be your playmaker, he is not building good passing relationships, even from a statistical standpoint. All right, enough about the passing. We know how bad that has been on the season. Only 1 corner kick for the Fire, only 6 crosses. So when you have this formation that is supposed to have your wingers running downfield and you get the goal off of a cross, why haven't you been doing that more? Why aren't you producing that? So even if you are playing a formation that's terrible, at least play it. Fire aren't even doing that. 13-1 tackles. At least they win one category. 2 saves by Richie on the night, and 2 yellow cards. At least the Fire ended up with only 2 yellow cards. But again, one of them was for failure to retreat. Like, have some discipline. That's everything I really want to talk about statistically here. And we are going to stop and take a break here, and we're going to bring in our special guest, John Donovan. Now, he's going to be on the podcast. It's a podcast feature only, so make sure you follow along on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. You can listen to all of John's commentary. And then on YouTube, we're going to take a short break. So with that, John, take it away. All right, we are back. John, thank you so much for the commentary. As always, we appreciate all your thoughts. And if you guys didn't know, John did play professionally for a few years back in the 70s in Venezuela. So he's got a unique perspective on some of his insight. And we really do appreciate, John, that you've chosen to share it with us here at Feed the Fire. And again, John Donovan's segment is brought to you by Skira Icelandic Spring Water, available at your local 7-Eleven. Skira Icelandic Spring Water comes from a spring in a government-protected preserve in Iceland. It is the purest water, and clearly, pun intended, it's the best. Go out, get yourself a bottle or two, available at your local 7-Eleven. I always have, right under here, you don't see under my desk, I got my little mini fridge here with a couple bottles at all times. So when I finish up this video and this podcast, I'll crack one open and just kind of lubricate the vocal cords a little bit more and recover a little bit. Now let's look ahead at the next part of the Fire's schedule and see if they can bounce up the standings, and then we'll talk about the standings and where the Fire are in the landscape of MLS. The Fire mercifully don't have another game until June 21st. So they've got now 9 days, because it's June 12th as I record, 9 days to recover, get their heads right. I don't know, maybe Klopas will take the guys back to Greektown again. It seemed to work in the very, very, very short term when they were playing St. Louis and he took over as interim manager. Maybe he'll take them to Greektown, or maybe he'll just let them do whatever it is they want to do to get their heads right and to get their bodies right. But they are going to Portland, an extremely difficult trip from a logistics standpoint, flying halfway across the country, but also a really, really difficult place to play. Portland Timbers home fans are some of the best in the league, and that environment in Providence Park is one of the hardest for visiting teams to play in. So they are going to have their work cut out for them, and then it doesn't get any easier going to Kansas City, a resurgent Kansas City who has been on a point streak lately and really finding their offense with Alan Pulido being healthy again. Then the Fire kick things off in July 1st at Orlando. So the Fire have a 3-game road trip coming up after this little mini break. And then they host Nashville, Montreal, and TFC to roll out July. So really, the Fire don't have any easy games from here on out, just because of the way they are playing, the way they are being managed, and the way their roster is constructed. They have no easy games. We've said it in episodes past. The margin for error is extremely slim. So now let's see how things are going around Major League Soccer. We'll do a quick little recap of the standings in the Eastern Conference. You have Cincinnati atop the East with 40 points, 2.35 points per game. That is supporter shield pace. That is, goodness, near record-breaking pace, if not record-breaking pace, if they can put another 40 points up the second half of the season. They would probably blow the record out of the water. If I recall, it's 73 points, I think is the most points in a season. It's incredible. Cincinnati does hold the record now for most points through the first 15 games, if I do recall. So they are playing at a record-breaking pace. They have 27 goals scored, 16 allowed. They're undefeated at home. Not just undefeated, they're perfect at home. 9 wins, no draws, no losses, and about 500 on the road. So actually above 500 on the road. 3 wins, 4 draws, and a loss. Sorry, thanks MLS for switching the losses and ties like most other leagues. But anyway, enough about Cincinnati. They're playing out of their mind, but they're going to have to see how they change up when Brenner is sold and moves on to his Italian club, and whether or not Lucho Acosta and Brandon Vasquez need to be preserved for a playoff run, for a U.S. Open Cup run, as that continues to go on. All right, the next best team in the Eastern Conference, Nashville, on 32 points. Nashville, we've seen what Hani Mukhtar can do. Firsthand, Chicago Fire fans got a hat trick against them earlier this season, and they are lethal on the counterattack. And that kind of style of play may not win you tons of games in the regular season. You're going to have your ups and downs, but if you can have a competent defense, and we've talked about their back line and their goalkeeping being above average and underrated by probably a lot of other fans, they can work that counterattack with Jacob Schaffelberg, Hani Mukhtar, and Abel Godoy, Randall Leal. They can work that to perfection. Philadelphia Union, despite having a down year by many standards. They're still in third place right now, tied with New England on 30 points for third and fourth place there. Tiebreaker going to Philadelphia because in MLS, first tiebreaker is wins. Wanted to put a little bit more incentive on the regular season. So the first tiebreaker there is wins. Then it goes to goal differential. I believe your goal scored. I'm going to have to look up the rules now. I always doubt myself when I'm talking to you guys. But I do know it's wins is the first tiebreaker. New England, again, having a really good season as well. Unlucky to have a 3-3 draw to the Fire, actually, from their perspective. Similarly, Atlanta is in fifth place. Again, unlucky to only have 4 points from the Fire instead of 6. And actually kind of lucky if you talk about that Marin Haile Selassie own goal going way back there. But Atlanta, the news for Atlanta is not just Miles Robinson coming back, but Yorgos Giacomakis. They're signing from Celtic. The Greek striker is the Golden Boot favorite right now. 10 goals in 14 games. And he said it. I'm a striker. I'm not going to be shy about it. I want to score goals. I want to win the Golden Boot. I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but you get the idea, right? He has confidence. I wouldn't call it cockiness or over swagger, if you want to call it that. But in his quotes recently, he's confident. And why not? He won the Golden Boot when he was playing in the Netherlands, I believe, or was it the Danish league? I forget which one. Pardon me. My apologies to the respective leagues. But when he was in Europe, Golden Boot, when he was playing in that league, also won a Golden Boot while playing with Celtic and wants to do it again here in Major League Soccer. So Yorgos Giacomakis, I kind of feel bad because the Fire should have been scouting this guy, right? We got Yorgos Koutsias, who is an up-and-coming prospect, but Giacomakis was ready from day one to make a difference and has been. Then you've got the Columbus Crew with their latest victory sitting in 6th place. I kind of find it hard to believe that the team with the best offense in the league, arguably, is sitting in 6th place in the Eastern Conference, but they've got a lot of away losses. That's their weakness, which makes this loss at home in Soldier Field even worse for the Chicago Fire. 2 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw away. So that is where the Columbus's weakness is. So they better hope they can climb into one of the top 4 or 5 spots and get a home playoff game by the end of the season. Rounding out the playoffs, as we know, it goes to 9 teams now with the new playoff format this year. Orlando, DC, and Montreal. Now, remember when DC was with the Chicago Fire in the bottom of the league last year? They did a few things like Christian Benteke getting more integrated, like Wayne Rooney figuring more things out and switching players around. DC is now in 8th place, 23 points. That is 6 ahead of the Fire. So they are a full 2 wins, if you think of it that way, ahead of the Fire, despite being right at the bottom of the league with the Fire at the end of last season. Just outside of the playoff lines on tiebreaker, Charlotte with 22 points. Charlotte, a team you can't count out, but a team that just doesn't look like they have it like they did last year. Red Bulls in 11th. Then I'm surprised to see New York City in 13th. And I didn't skip Toronto, but I'm just shocked to see NYCFC this far down. I have not kept up with them. So fans, tell me, is it injuries? Is it just the fact that they don't have those guys that they used to? Is it all down to Tati? Is it all down to Messi leaving, right? They are rotating players, but I don't expect them to be down for long. And we will see if they can bring someone in over this summer transfer window. In fact, I would expect it, who can make a difference for that team. So again, looking at the bottom half of the Eastern Conference, you have Charlotte 10th, Red Bulls 11th, Toronto 12th, New York 13th, Chicago 14th, and Inter Miami. With all the news about Leo Messi coming to Miami during the summer's transfer window, they are still at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, 15 points, 0.88 per game. And they, thankfully for LA Galaxy and Colorado, are not the worst team in MLS. But here's the thing, fans. We know the top 6 teams in the East are really good. We know Orlando, DC, Montreal, Charlotte, and to a certain extent, Red Bulls, they're all right. They can get results. They've been around. They know what they're doing. But then let's look at all the teams around Chicago. Toronto, New York City, and Miami. Toronto, they've got some issues. Their players have some issues with Bradley. But if they can work that out, they've got the talent. Even when they were in the thick of their terribleness, they still drew the Fire 0-0. New York City, like I said, I would anticipate, and this is just knowing City Football Group and kind of knowing NYCFC a little bit, not anything I've researched or investigated or heard from, I would expect them to get some help over the summer, or at least to figure things out, especially over some of the summer break. Miami, enough said, they're getting Leo Messi this summer. All the teams around Chicago are going to be better in the second half of the season. And the Chicago Fire, if you're watching me on YouTube, I just kind of did like the exploding head thing with my hands here, because I honestly can't think of a scenario where the Chicago Fire front office makes a good move in order to bring in an impact player that will help Chicago fight for a playoff spot this season. Now, back several weeks ago when Ezra Hendrickson was fired and Frank Klopas took over, I thought the Fire could still make the playoffs given the talent on their roster. But then, due to injuries, mismanagement, and absolute lack of depth that is just showing more than I ever thought it would, there's no way that I see the Fire making the playoffs at this point right now as their roster is made up. Honestly, if it were me, I'd dump Herbers and Shabilko and just let some of the bench guys play. Bring a couple guys up from CF2 and get them on the roster and get them some, maybe not first team minutes, but for some first team exposure to what the game atmosphere is like and what training is like. And then you can kind of start to build some momentum for the future, right? The one thing, speaking of bringing up young guys, we didn't see Kendall Burke's feature in that match against Columbus, and thankfully they didn't. Otherwise, probably would have been 4-1 instead of just a 2-1 stunner from Zelarayan. So anyway, that's the Eastern Conference breakdown, and we're going to talk about the Western Conference, not in as much depth, just because it's not as bearing on the Chicago Fire, but it is interesting to note St. Louis is still atop of the table with 29 points, atop of the Western Conference table with 29 points, 1.81 points per game, 9 wins on the season. They had that rough patch, and they are starting to recover a little bit. Seattle is in the second spot. They have had a rough patch lately with some losses and draws, picking up some injuries and things. But you always will give Brian Smetzer and the Seattle Sounders the benefit of the doubt that they know how to navigate the second half of an MLS season. And if they are not going to finish number 1 in the West, then I have no doubt that they know how many points they need to not finish lower than 4th by the end of that season and secure a couple home games. So I would not worry about Seattle. LAFC, do you have to worry about them? They just got shellacked by Houston. Houston dropped 4 goals on them, and it was either 4-0 or 4-1. The final score escapes me. But do we have to worry about Champions League finally catching up to them? Maybe. We've seen how that affects other MLS teams throughout the history of Champions League runs here. And are they going to go into that summer lull? Are they going to even take Leagues Cup seriously now, since it looks like they are probably out of the Supporters Shield race? And are they going to want to go for Leagues Cup? Or are they going to want to save it all for a postseason run? Regardless, LAFC has the talent. They should remain top 4 in the Western Conference. They are tied on points with Dallas and San Jose, who come in at 4 and 5. Nice to see San Jose making some progress, moving up the standings. Same thing with Dallas, continuing where they were last year. Here are the few surprises now. The bottom half of the Western playoff table: 6, 7, 8, 9, Vancouver, Houston, Portland, Kansas City. Vancouver playing well, getting a little bit of momentum. Really good at home. 5 wins, 4 draws, and a loss. But on the road, no wins. So that's where Vancouver has to work on. But you know what? That's what they say when you're building a team. Like, just win at home, get your draws on the road. Well, right now, they're winning at home and losing on the road, but they're still in that 6th spot. So Vancouver could be a team to hover right around that 4 to 7 spot for the rest of the season, depending on some other results, especially with the lack of a long drawn out U.S. Open Cup as opposed to a shorter Canadian Championship run if they make it. Houston's been a big surprise and upturn from them. They are finding their offense, getting into the 7th spot. Portland looked dead early in the season, and now they're back in the 8th spot. Same thing with Kansas City. Everyone said after the first month, this is the year. It's time to blow it up. Time to get rid of Vermees, at least from a coaching standpoint. Forget Polito, forget Kinda, forget all. Time to move on from Zusi and Russell and all these guys. But all of a sudden, they brought in a few signings. They kind of got clicking. They got healthy, and now they're banging in goals and getting points as a result. They have moved up into that 9th spot on 20 points. They own the tiebreaker with Minnesota and RSL, who are just on the outside of the playoff line in the 10th and 11th spot. Then on the bottom of the table, here are your other surprises. Austin, Galaxy, Colorado Rapids, 12, 13, 14 on 19, 13, and 13 points. Galaxy, major disappointment. You've seen all the videos by now of fans talking to players about Chris Klein being let go. Like, they're in turmoil on the field and in the front office. Nothing's going right for the Galaxy. I kind of almost feel bad that the players still have to go out and play. But they also have a part in it in completely underperforming. Austin is a crazy outlier because of how great they were last season. You knew they were going to revert a little, but you didn't think the pendulum would swing all the way back. So Austin still has some offensive talent, but they need to figure out their defense. They've given up 27 goals already through 17 games, -9 goal differential there. The Colorado Rapids, bottom of the league, worst team in the league, 13 points, 0.72 points per game. No wins at home. They're the only team who has not won a home game this season. So if it weren't bad enough, the fans haven't even seen a win yet. Colorado Rapids, everyone says they're the budget team, and that's why they're not good. Maybe if they'd go out and spend a little bit, that they could do better. They've had some injuries this season that have hurt them. But to be perfectly honest, I feel like Colorado is a team people are higher on than what they've ever actually performed over the last several years. Now, if it wasn't last year, then it was the year before, or it was 2 seasons ago when they won the Western Conference on decision day. And a couple calls go the other way. They end up actually finishing 4th or 5th. I think it was 4th place. But it showed, hey, we won the Western Conference. Like, look, we've arrived. Everything's working. Like Robin Fraser is great coach, and look what he can do with this subpar talent and subpar roster compared to the big spenders in the Western Conference. Well, yeah, look what he's doing now. You're the worst team in the league. I'm not a big fan of him or his coaching style, especially when he took a shot at Greeks in the league a while back, saying Greeks are not diversity hires, and that they should be treated just like white coaches, and that they should be interviewing more real minority coaches. So I took a lot of issue when he said that. And so, you know what? Hey, it's the Greek in me. Good. I'm glad he's at the bottom of the conference. Regardless, Colorado, LA Galaxy, Austin, not doing very much right this season. The other news, speaking of the bottom of the Western Conference, RSL here in 11th, they just signed former LAFC great Chicho Arango to a new contract. He had gone from LAFC down to Liga MX, I want to say Pachuca for a bit, and is now going to come back with RSL. That could change things up for the playoff picture in the Western Conference. So with that, Fire fans, we're going to wrap it here. Given the fact that the Fire don't have a game for another 9 days, we may stagger out a few episodes in between. So definitely turn your notifications on, whether you've subscribed on YouTube or follow along on Spotify, so you know when the next episode comes out. We appreciate your support, and at least until 9 days from now, let's go Fire.